Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Happy Thursday, best day of the week. On tomorrow's show, we're going to spend some time talking about the president's, I'm not exaggerating or kidding here, the president's path to victory, the one that he's trying to take. And you can decide whether or not you think it's wise and or possible. We'll do that tomorrow. Before we do that, though, I want to take a little peek down this rabbit hole. Oh, by the way, news came out yesterday that Georgia, they're going to do a recount by hand, which I feel like will take forever, but is still a very good thing to do. Let me start off here with this quote from Scott Adams. He said, one of these things is true. Either Trump is irrationally clinging to hope, or he has seen more than the public has seen so far about election fraud, and he's letting the press hang itself before revealing it. First, there's definitely voter fraud. There's been voter fraud forever. Right? The question is how much. And with unprecedented, it could be like 10 people, 10 dead people voting, or it could be 50,000 people. We don't know, right? With unprecedented mail-in ballots, which are infinitely easier to steal and manipulate and harvest, there's gonna be more voter fraud than ever. The question is how much. Listen, the ballot harvesting, it could be as simple as people in Atlanta or Philadelphia, Democratic Party people knocking on doors, door to door, all across the city, saying, hey, by the way, can you hand me your ballot? You know that ballot that you just got in the mail? You've never voted in your life, but you randomly got a ballot. Can I just have it? I'll just take it. I'm gonna vote for the Democrat. I'm gonna vote for Joe Biden. And they're like, yeah, okay, here, boom. That's it. And that would be perfectly legal. Impossible previously because we weren't just mailing out millions of ballots. Let me say this other point too before we get going. Ethically, if you're a Democrat and you think Trump is Hitler, okay, put yourself in a Democrat's position here. If you think Trump is Hitler, you could justify anything, doing anything to get rid of him. And you could say you would never cheat. But if you're gonna get Hitler out of the White House, if that's what's on the line, you'd do anything. Think about that. You think Hitler is in the White House, you think he is responsible for the death of hundreds of thousands of Americans from COVID. He's snatching babies at the border. He's got a Muslim ban, whatever, he's ruining the nation. If you believe those things and you didn't cheat, the left could say you were acting unethically. If you're a Democrat and you let the racists in this country decide who our president's gonna be, that would be unethical, based on warped logic. Make sense? Okay. So let's play the game here. Steve Cortez, he's on Trump's team. I've read, I think, nearly every case for voter fraud so far. Nothing's been super convincing, to be honest. Or I should say, nothing's been convincing enough, as it would need to be, to convince either the Supreme Court or, and this is what we'll talk about tomorrow, the state legislatures of, let's just say, Pennsylvania and Georgia, which are controlled by Republicans, to overturn the results of the people. And that's the bar that needs to be set. Like, Trump's team doesn't need to convince me that there's voter fraud. They don't need to convince you. They need to convince really the state legislatures that there's enough. But there are some statistical irregularities, some statistical anomalies that don't prove anything, but are definitely red flags for, wait a second, let's dig deeper here. And I have full trust that the Trump team is going through all the data and making as many phone calls. They could be making hundreds of thousands of phone calls to everybody who it says voted by absentee all across Pennsylvania. I'll tell you this, my buddy who's in the military, lives here in San Diego, he voted in Pennsylvania absentee. He said yesterday, he showed me his phone, I didn't believe him, he got 25 phone calls from Pennsylvania. 25 phone calls from Pennsylvania yesterday. I don't exactly know why, but that's weird. And I'm sure it has something to do with the election. Anyway, turnout, crazy high turnout. So let's just do Wisconsin. So Wisconsin turnout was 90% of registered voters. Australia, which has mandatory voting. If you don't vote in Australia, you get fined $20. If you don't vote a second time, you get fined $50. They only have a 92% turnout. And Wisconsin had a 90% turnout? Milwaukee was 84% turnout. Now, let me play devil's advocate for each of these points here. A Democrat would say, yeah, Slater, it was an important swing state in an important election, and Democrats did an amazing job of getting out the vote. Okay, but Cleveland, Ohio, swing state, Cleveland, similar city in many ways to Milwaukee, they had only a 51% turnout. So why didn't Cleveland have a 90% turnout like Milwaukee did? It's weird. Or Milwaukee had 84% turnout. Wisconsin had a 90% turnout. That's... Second, Biden-only ballots. This one's so weird. So these are people who only voted for Joe Biden. So in Georgia, Trump got 2.4 million votes, and only 818 people voted for Trump only and not the Senate races. All right? So pretty much only 818 people. 2.4 million people also voted for Joe Biden. But 95,000 people only voted for Joe Biden and not in the Senate or down ballot races. That's weird. What is that? 818 people only voted for Trump, and that's it. 95,000 people only voted for Biden? So I don't understand that on both sides. I don't understand why a voter would only vote for Biden and no one else. I don't understand that. But also, if you were trying to rig the election, if you're harvesting ballots, let's say you're, like I said earlier, you're a Democratic operative and you're just like asking people for their ballots and you've collected 1,000 ballots from people in this neighborhood. Why would you not also try to win the Senate or everything else too? Why would you only, I don't get that one at all from either perspective. But that's going to be something they look into. Third or fourth thing, whatever we're on. I think this is the one that matters the most, quite frankly. Because they're the mail-in votes. Let's focus on Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania knew that they were going to get just this massive swarm of mail-in ballots that they weren't prepared to handle. I think the numbers were in Georgia, Obama had, I think, 83,000 mail-in ballots. Hillary had 95,000 mail-in ballots. And Biden had 850,000 mail-in ballots, right? So it's like this tidal wave of mail-in ballots that the county registrar's offices were not prepared to handle. So back to Pennsylvania. Because of that, they decided to be way more lax in allowing the ballots that normally would not have been counted. So in Pennsylvania, this last election, they only rejected 0.03% of the ballots. That's 1/30 of the rejection rate that Pennsylvania had for absentee ballots in 2016. So the point of that is they just let everything by. First-time mail-in voters typically have a rejection rate of about 3%. So first-time voters, 3%, first-time mail-in voters, 3% of them are usually rejected for different reasons. Right? Don't put a signature on it or whatever. That's 100 times the rejection rate of what Pennsylvania had just a couple days ago. Now, with so many first-time voters, first-time mail-in voters, you'd think the rejection rate would be even higher than the normal 3%, but certainly not 0.03%. Apparently, New York had a majority mail-in vote in June, and 21% of the ballots were rejected. Now, why is this one noteworthy? Because these are the easiest votes to overturn. Trump's team wants to go back and reject all those ballots that normally, under normal circumstances, would have been rejected. Here's the math. Right now, Biden's lead in Pennsylvania is 47,000. There's 1.2 million mail-in ballots. Biden won 78.5% of them with a 5% rejection rate. There's 47,000. Boom, that's it. Tied. Now, maybe they don't reject 5%, maybe they reject 2%, maybe they reject 3%. That, with a couple other things, now you have a tie race or whatever. Right? So that one, prepare for that. Get prepared for that, for Trump's team moving forward there. Cool, so lots of numbers there. And I'm also sure that Biden's team could prove that these things are not statistically odd. Right? But I think it's enough to justify looking further into. And if I could say something to Team Trump, could you hurry up, please? Can we get some proof here? Hard proof. Listen, statistical anomalies, it's great. Very interesting in those. There's something called like Benlam's Law or something, and whatever. We're not going to spend time on that, but like, I get it. But let's see it. Quick. Time's running out. You have to really, timelines are tricky here, but December 13th? when do the electors meet? The 3rd, December 3rd or December 13th? 14th, December 14th. But if you want to do recounts or whatever, you got to start proving this stuff now, so there's time to do all these things moving forward. Big picture moving forward, and I never thought I'd say this, but we need to be more like France. There's 2 ways we need to be more like the French: nuclear power and election day. France used to have mail-in ballots. From 1958 to 1975, they had mail-in ballots, and in 1975, they got rid of them. Too much fraud, or too high of a chance for fraud. They got rid of them. Instead, all the voting in France is done on paper ballots, which I think we have a picture of this. There it is. Paper ballot. You put it in a transparent box, which never leaves the polling station, and is counted right there at the polling station in public view, right out of the box. That's what we need. There's no chain of custody problems along the way. Right there, day of, boom. So I read through some of the arguments that were made in 1975 about the debate to get rid of mail-in voting. And here's some French guy. This is actually the guy who wrote the bill to get rid of it. He said there's within the electoral process certain preferential areas where fraud is more prevalent because the offered facility creates an easy temptation, an extra propensity, sometimes an almost indecent provocation. Come, commit fraud, fill this out, steal that ballot. It's an indecent provocation. Such, ladies and gentlemen, is mail-in voting. That is exactly what the president said. I guess this would have been like 2 days after the election or something like that. He gave some speech and he said, mail-in voting, he said it makes people corrupt, even if they aren't by their nature, but they become corrupt. It's too easy. That is such a good line. And he just like flippantly threw it out there. And I heard that. I said, oh, that's brilliant. He needs to make, even if people aren't corrupt by their nature, it's too easy. It's too easy. And that's what the French guy was saying in 1975. It's an indecent provocation, an easy temptation. And again, if Trump's Hitler, you're going to do everything you can to get rid of him. Now, I think I mentioned this the other day, but it's worth repeating. And this is the saddest part of all, the most concerning thing of all. Even if Trump had incontrovertible proof of fraud, I'm saying he had video of Joe and Hunter Biden conspiring together on video, exactly how they're going to fill in ballots and steal ballots and print out extra ballots, whatever. If everything was on video outlined and Trump's team walked into the New York Times headquarters or walked into CNN with it, you think you'd ever hear about it? And he's, of course not, the answer. And you think, well, Trump will just tweet it out. You think Twitter would allow that to be tweeted out? And I think that's even a bigger problem than the election fraud itself. There's no trust in our media. And if anything ever comes out, they just spin it up, right? Like, oh, it's just a glitch. Oh, they claim unproven claims without evidence. That's just disinformation. They'd spin it, dismiss it away like it never happened. And look at the Hunter Biden emails. Look what they were able to do. That's a perfect example. How easy can they just make something disappear? We'll see. Stay tuned. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about how I'm going to tell you Trump's plan. If you want a little sneak peek, you can go check out the 12th Amendment. It's interesting to me, people who think we're out of the woods with this election. We're not. In fact, the worst case scenario for our country is still brewing and ready to erupt. We're not out of the woods. And then also people think, oh, the vaccine's here, the stock market, look at the stock market's rebounded, everything's great, and the price of gold is going down because we're out of the woods. And then also people aren't taking into consideration with the vaccine, they're not taking into consideration the difficulty, the logistical difficulties of getting the vaccine to people. And that's what it would take to really open the economy. And now you see Biden's COVID advisor is talking about how we need another 4 to 6 week national shutdown. You think that would only be 4 to 6 weeks? And then on top of all that, we're supposed to ignore the trillions of dollars of spending and the trillions of printing of money that we've had these last few weeks. Listen, I'm an optimistic guy, and I could be optimistic about the future, but you got to be realistic. All of these things, election, COVID, just rioting to come, federal spending, or the Fed and federal spending and printing, none of that stuff's hitting the fan yet. So the fact that gold is hovering just under 1900 for me is really good news, because that's an extension to me. It's an extension to get some gold in your hands before everything does hit the fan. Patriot Gold Group, A+, Better Business Bureau, 4 years, Consumer Affairs, 5-star, #1 gold IRA dealer. These are the best. Patriot Gold Group, give them a call. It takes just a few minutes. They'll answer all your questions. There's no rush. There's no pressure. But I hate the idea of opportunities passing by. Sea of Gold is a good idea for you and your family, as the rest of the country thinks we're out of the woods. I don't think we are. 1-800-798-4260, 1-800-798-4260, or patriotgoldgroup.com. Hey, Slater Crusaders. Coming up next, I want to talk about the Obamacare case that's in front of the Supreme Court. Kind of lost sight of some other things that are happening in the world. I want to take a minute here and talk about a 3-part solution to fix this country. We got to get back to God. We have to reflect on ourselves, and we have to serve others. That's the point. God, ourselves, others. We'll start with John MacArthur here. He says, our nation has rejected God and his law, and we're watching the consequences play out on a daily basis as our culture sinks lower into chaos, confusion, corruption, perversion, and wretchedness. If you want proof that we've forfeited our ability to reason and think clearly, look no further than the faulty solutions that are promoted to address our problems. It seems the answer to racism is more racism, with some calling for the resegregation of society, such as the futility and irrationality of the reprobate mind that rejects God. Postmodernism is deteriorating into outright paganism. The social justice movement is founded on the absurd idea that everything is a social construct, that each person is born without any innate characteristics, only to be shaped and molded by the white male patriarchy or some other oppressor class. The typical person today fundamentally denies God's image in humanity and won't submit to his divine authority over his own creation. Meanwhile, social justicians are intent on tearing down every last element of society. They are increasingly targeting the church. So John MacArthur, in that speech, he quoted J.C. Ryle. J.C. Ryle was a bishop in Liverpool, England. He died in 1900, and he spoke a lot about the relationship between church and state and what happens when people stop worshiping God. And he said, in what manner God would punish England if English government casts off all connection with him, I cannot tell. Right? So it's like if England, if we just forget about God, if we ignore God, what is God going to do to us? I don't know. And he goes through some possibilities, and he ends it with this. He says, but one thing I am sure, the state that sows the seed of national neglect of God will sooner or later reap a harvest of national disaster and national ruin. So we're seeing a national neglect of God, certainly. Second thing, so we got to get back to that, is the point. Second thing, we're also seeing a personal neglect of ourselves and our own failures and our own sins and our own contributions to the failures of said nation. And no one wants to hear this. I understand this is not a very popular message. I mentioned this in passing yesterday. I mentioned a scene from Dante's Inferno. Here's the line that I was referring to. So this book was written in like the 1300s. Dante goes to hell, and he's traveling through the 7 layers of it, and each sin's deeper and deeper. And the third is the terrace of wrath, anger, right? So Dante meets up with Marco and asks him, why is the world so screwed up? He has this great line. Dante says, the world is barren of every virtue. The world is barren of every virtue and heavy with and overgrown by evil. Please point out to me the cause, that I may know it and make it known to others. Why is there no virtue in the world? Why is there so much chaos and evil? Tell me. And Marco says a couple things, but cutting to the chase, he says, if the world around you goes astray, in you is the cause, and in you let it be sought. Seek for the cause, sought, right? Seek for it in you. Seek for the cause in you, not others. And just post-election here, post-election. I feel like this is a great season just for massive self-reflection because the world's going to pot and there's only so much I can do to fix it, right? There's only so much you can do to fix it. Everything that's out there. But there's everything I can do to fix myself and my role in the lives of the people around me, which brings us to point number 3. So it's God, me, and then serving others. So we've been talking about Orwell's 1984 and also Huxley's Brave New World, 2 different dystopian books. And yesterday's show, we quoted Neil Postman. Let me do that again here. This is Neil Postman, his book, Amused to Death. He said what Orwell feared were those who would ban books. What Huxley feared was that there would be no reason to ban a book, for there'd be no one who wanted to read one. Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information, Big Brother. Huxley feared those who would give us so much that we would be reduced to passivity and egoism. I think that, and there's more there, but I think and you can go to our YouTube page at the first and you can watch all of the previous shows. I think the Huxley future is more likely. I think it's where we are right now, right? There's no Stalin crackdown on the American people, but there's amusement and ignorance and TikTok and giggles and just a bombardment of information nonstop. But I want to introduce a third dystopian option. You have your 1984, which is more Big Brother cracking down, banning books. And there's elements of that too, right, with social media, obviously. And then you have Huxley's Brave New World, which is more just we're all clueless and doesn't matter and whatever. Then you have Walker Percy's Love in the Ruins. It was written in 1971. So in this dystopian book, the country is split between far left and far right. So the main character is trying to make sense of it all, and he tries to find the truth in religion. But that split has penetrated the church, which is becoming true today, especially with critical race theory. You have mainline Protestants on the very far left, and you have evangelicals on the very far right, which is pretty true today right now. The split in our nation is on social issues. It's on sexuality, it's like gay, transgender stuff, also premarital sex, all that, abortion, and euthanasia, end of life, which is going to be more and more relevant, especially with Ezekiel, Emmanuel, but we'll say that for another day. In the book, there's a black separatist movement as well. This is from a book review. The knotheads, those are the people on the far right, increasingly suffer from anger management issues and obsession with conspiracy theories. Meanwhile, the leftists feel more and more anxious and detached from the world around them. The country as a whole is characterized by a spiritual malaise, sporadic violence, and rising rates of suicide. So the main point of the book at the end, I'll cut to the chase, the solution is that improvement to our society only comes from, yes, improvement of yourself, but also investment in your community. Yourself, your family, the community. So this is from the book. So the guy, he goes and he talks to his priest. The priest says, don't tell me the USA went down the drain because of leftism, knotheadism, apostasy, pornography, polarization, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things may have happened, but what finally tore it was that things stopped working and nobody wanted to be a repairman. So the priest says, focus less on yourself, right? Fix yourself, right? But then get out of yourself. And he said to do your job and show bits of ordinary kindness to people, particularly your own families. That's the solution. So that's a very long way of saying, you want to fix this country? We got to get back to God. We got to deal with our own sin. And we got to serve others. We got to get back to God, deal with our own sin, and serve others. It is a solution as old as time. True story. Mike Slater. We'll come back. We'll talk about the Obamacare case in the Supreme Court. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I want to talk about the division that exists today, right? A little post-election dust settling, although, as I've been saying, the dust is not yet settled fully. And what to make of it, and how we're supposed to look at where we're at right now. Do that with the author of The Plot to Change America, How Identity Politics is Dividing the Land of the Free, the great Mike Gonzalez, Senior Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Mike, how are you, sir?
How are you, Mike? Hello to you.
Good to talk to you.
The great people of the Big Apple.
Yeah, man. So what is, we see the division, we feel the division. What is the role of the media and or social media in our perception of the division of our country?
Well, the media fuels the perception that we're divided. The whole thing about identity politics is that we're divided as a country into categories that are based on race, sex, ethnicity, whatever, anything that confers a sense of victimhood. And the media loves that. It's like bees to honey. And social media, of course, is the media cubed, right? It's a media on steroids. And of course, this constant obsession with labeling people by their categories. They first, even before they mention the name of what they're going to do with their policies, they first trans, Latino, Afro, Cuban woman elected to this office. No mention of her name, no mention of whatever her policies will be. Just the category is what matters, and the media loves that.
Yeah, I saw one the other day. It was like first Muslim trans woman elected to something, and you're like, who cares? What are their policies, right?
Right, exactly. So yeah, without the media, it would be sustained because the academy does a lot to it to sustain it as well. And the fact that we have this system of benefits that are granted to members just because they're members of categories, but the media is a big part of the story.
Yeah, I think I could ask you this. Something I've been thinking about, the atomization of our media and how you can just go get whatever information you want and from whatever pod of information you want. And I just feel no uniting force in this country anymore. I don't see anything in our popular culture that's uniting. There's nothing we share. I don't know. I don't see how this continues to go well for our country. What do you think?
Well, you're talking about two different things, right? I'm very happy that we no longer have a media monopoly. I'm very happy you exist. I'm very happy Fox exists. I watch everything. I watch MSNBC. I watch CNN. I do, actually. And I watch you, and I watch Fox, and I watch everyone. And I read, we get the Washington Post here at home. I read the New York Times. I read the Wall Street Journal, for which I write from time to time. That's one thing. That's a good thing, the fact that there's no longer a media monopoly by the left. The other thing that you're referring to is that we're not in normal politics. We're in regime politics. And regime politics are much more volatile. We're not discussing really how to get to the same place, the different paths to get to the same place. We're discussing what is America. Many writers, Christopher Caldwell among them, he wrote a really good book this year, and I wrote a good book this year, but he wrote perhaps an even better book. Charles Kessler of the Claremont Institute has a book coming out soon, talk about these two rival constitutions that exist right now. And our politics are about deciding the tension between these two rival constitutions. One of them is the 1787 Constitution of the framers, and the other one is this rival constitution which violates all the Bill of Rights, every one of the 10 Bill of Rights in the Bill of Rights, the 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights, which grants benefits as a result of the color of your skin or your sex or what have you. We have to resolve this. We cannot be a country that is caught between one constitution and the other.
Yeah, I'd say we also have a rival conversation going on about stories of what America even is, right? You have the story that you and I know, and then we have the 1619 Project story, which is obviously completely different. Yeah, we got to get this down as a country. We better figure this out and start having some agreement. In your article, your most recent article on Heritage, you talk about what one would say is like maybe fringe people. And the question is how prominent and influential are these Marxists in our universities and all these other people who are like crazy far on the left? How influential are they really?
Well, they're very influential. They're infinitesimally small as a percentage of the population. The Hidden Tribes Project a couple of years ago said they were about 8% of the population, but they've colonized us. With colonies, the British Empire, it was a small minority that ran India or that ran many parts of Africa. Thousands of people running millions. There's an analogy to be made there. The woke are in charge of the academy. They're in charge of the media. They're in charge of the entertainment industry. And in that sense, they're in charge of our minds. Every time we talk about diversity and inclusion or social justice or minorities, we're really using the language, the lexicon of the left. Now, if we get to brass tacks, we talk about Black Lives Matter. Just a couple of days ago, the leader, the Marxist leader of the Black Lives Matter organization, the global movement, wrote a letter to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, requesting a meeting, saying, in her words, "We delivered this vote for you, and now you have to meet our demands." This is Patrisse Cullors, just to recap, is a woman who has described herself as a trained Marxist, and that is a very apt description. She trained with Eric Mann, a former member of the Weather Underground, for 10 years in the community strategy organization of Los Angeles. So yeah, I mean, I think they're very influential. They play key roles.
It's really amazing how influential, like credit to them, how influential such a small group of people has been able to become. So what is this silent majority that are conservatives, I think? What are we to do now? First of all, stop being silent, right? And I hate that we even have this is like a source of pride that we're the silent majority. Like, enough of that. But what else do you recommend we do to break free of our colonizers?
Well, I think that we need to free ourselves of the fear that we're going to be called names, or that we're going to be called racist, or if we know we're not racist, if we know we harbor no racist thoughts, and what we want is the good for all Americans, we need to describe this. We need to say, no, I am all for diversity if it obtains organically. It's a beautiful thing if it's a result of meritocracy. And by all means, let's create a society in which meritocracy lifts everybody. A guy named Gonzalez, a guy named Slater, and we have the same opportunities. This is what we want. But when it becomes enforced, when it becomes a quota system, it requires coercion. And that is something that we do not want. We have to be able to speak in those terms. We have to be able to say, there's no Hispanic category, there's no Latino vote, as we have seen in the recent election. We have a Cuban vote in Miami, which differs sometimes with the Cuban vote in New Jersey, the Cuban American vote in New Jersey, and we have the Mexican American vote in the Rio Grande Valley, the heartland of Tejano country in South Texas, and we have the Mexican American vote in Los Angeles, which is very different. And we have to pretend that we have a Latino vote is a crazy thing. But of course, consultants have families and they have to feed them as well.
Let's speak about that Hispanic thing for a little bit, because I've heard the media dismiss this as like, oh, it's just the Cubans. Just the Cubans got tricked and scared by the conservative media that socialism's coming. But what have you seen nationwide about this so-called Hispanic vote?
First of all, let's address that very briefly, because I saw CNN's Christiana Manpour talk about this, and I've seen Univision in Spanish talk about this, that this is misinformation. No, it just so happens that this close to 10 people in the Democratic Conference now in the House that self-identify as socialists, and it just so happens that the founders of the Black Lives Matter organization, it's not the concept, are Marxists. This is not misinformation. Also, as I said, counties in the Rio Grande Valley, counties such as Hidalgo, Zapata, Trump won Zapata County, by the way, counties such as Webb County, Jim Hogg County, they swung massively towards Trump by comparison to the 2016 vote. I'm talking about swings of 50 percentage points, 40 percentage points, 30 percentage points in all these counties. These are Mexican Americans. These are not Cubans. And the Puerto Rican vote in Central Florida, in Osceola County, in the I-4 corridor, appears to have also have been supportive of Trump. So this is an example. Of course, the Mexican American vote in Arizona and California was very different from the RGV. Indeed, the urban Mexican-American vote in Texas was very different from the RGV. So what it shows is that the so-called Latino vote was just like the vote of everyone else.
Yep. Yeah. Just which I think goes back to the real divide in our country, which is city versus country. But
Right.
yeah, it's just, there's no more block. I wish we could stop talking about blocks of votes. And this idea of Hispanic is such a nebulous concept anyway, right?
It would have occurred to nobody to lump together the Irish vote in Southie in Boston with the Scots-Irish vote in Kentucky or West Virginia. Any consultant who did that would be be learning to code right away.
Last question for you, Mike, to go back a bit about equity and meritocracy and all that. The argument, the quick comeback from Kamala and the rest is, well, some people don't have the opportunities. They don't have a leg up. They don't have the chances that you or I have in this country, and we need to give them a chance.
Well, I think we need to actually look into that, and there is some truth to the fact that there are communities that suffer more. And we need to look at why they suffer and address the real issues. What are the issues with family breakdown, which by the way, happens with all races, right? What are the issues with out-of-wedlock rates? What are the issues with schools that are just plain bad, not just bad, but dangerous? Well, why should African-American kids be consigned to schools that are so bad? Don't we need school choice in America? So we do need to have a conversation. What we do not need to do is instill grievances into people because, or for heaven's sakes, just drop and get rid of capitalism, which is what the leaders of the Black Lives Matter organizations want to do. They say this. This is not Mike Gonzalez saying this. They say smash capitalism. Alicia Garza says this. Patrice Cullors says this. That's not going to help anybody. That's not going to help Black Americans. That's not going to help Cuban Americans. That's not going to help you, me, anyone. That's going to only hurt us.
That's the real end. All this is a means. The plot to change America, how identity politics is dividing the land of the free. Mike Gonzalez, always a pleasure to talk to you, sir. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Mike. Great to be on with you.
True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I want to go to someone who I've been following for a long time now, and it's an honor to have on the show. Zoe Rachel, he's the founder of Bronze Serpent Media. Check out bronzeserpentmedia.com. Zoe, what's going on, brother?
And good to be here, man. Thank you. Good morning.
Yeah, dude. So we conservatives have lost every single aspect of the culture war. First of all, do you agree? B, what do we do?
Well, very much agree. And I would really like for conservatives to understand, and I mean this is tough love, man. We're going to talk tough love here, right? Conservatives, they have to, kind of stop doing these reversals that they do on themselves, these counterproductive efforts that they make. Like, for one, they keep saying that government is a problem, government is not the answer. The problem is but with conservatives, they keep looking for politicians to solve these things. And they need to understand that they want this political representation, but they don't seem to understand that their political representation is only as stable as their cultural representation. That's where these people don't just appear out of thin air to run an office. They're a product of the culture too. And conservatives, while they've got they're pumping their fist against the government and trying to hold their feet to the fire, they've got their back turned to the culture, who's doing all sorts of crazy stuff behind their back. So unless conservatives really come to grip with the importance of having this cultural connection and cultural representation, our political representation is always going to be unstable.
So right. What's the Breitbart line? How does he put it? Do you remember? It was politics is downstream of culture. Is it downstream or downhill?
Downstream. And that was one of the reasons why Breitbart and I connected so many years ago, because he saw what I was trying to do with that. He had the resources to run with it, and it invited me into the fold, and we went from there.
Yeah, it's so easy to get excited about. Unless I wanted Trump to win, and we get excited about it. But man, that's missing the point. So where would you say is one aspect of our culture that conservatives need to grab and never let go of again?
Man, this is going to sound really cliche, but unfortunately, this is the big piece right here, man. Conservatives have to stop being in denial about systemic racism. Racism is the biggest weapon that the Democrat Party has against the Republican Party, and the problem is that Democrats are They are the problem of racism. They're the one who instituted the problem of racism or demanded to maintain it. They're the ones who instituted white privilege. They're the ones who instituted systemic racism and fought to keep systemic racism. And Republicans are in denial of it. No, in our national pride, there's no systemic racism. There's no white privilege. Like, yes, there is. And every time you say that there isn't, you're giving the Democrats an out. When Republicans talk about this new Democrat Party, it's like there's nothing new about the Democrat Party. The Democrats are doing the same crazy stuff that they've been doing. What was there some noble Democrat Party that was 50 years ago? No, these are the same crazy people that they are today. Why do Republicans keep giving the Democrats an out, making people think that this is some new Democrat Party that is not guilty of all the evils that they're doing today? They're still filled with hate today, the same way that they were in the 1800s. And until Republicans come to grip with that, they're always going to lose in the culture war and give Democrats everything that they need to promote their lunacy.
Okay, so I'm totally with you that the biggest weapon used against conservatives is racism, whether it's true or not, right? But so what do we do about that? What do you mean by systemic racism exactly, and where it exists?
Well, that's the big question. Well, what is this systemic racism? Well, systemic racism, when it was easy to point out when we had things like, Jim Crow, when we had things like, revocation of civil rights, revocation of voter rights and stuff like that. The same stuff that Democrats are trying to accuse conservatives of today, like, with voter ID and things like that, these tests that they're accusing Republicans. Like, well, that was Democrats who did that. That's not Republicans who did that. But those things are obvious aspects of systemic racism. But when we have, like, as the saying goes, the soft bigotry of low expectations and things like that, when we have the so-called prison industrial complex, when we have things like police brutality or high abortion rates or unemployment, single parent homes and things like that. Well, these are things that are engineered by the Democrat Party. These things are still systemic racism. Or an example would be like when we talk about Hollywood. Conservatives know that Hollywood is racist. We know that Hollywood in itself is a promoter of systemic racism while hiding behind accusing somebody else of doing it. Their industry is smoke and mirrors. That's what they do. Right. But the thing is, when a black person comes out, like, say, for instance, Ice Cube comes out and says, hey, Hollywood is racist, then all of a sudden conservatives, there goes those black people again complaining about systemic racism. It's like, no, why are you letting Democrats get away with that? You know that Hollywood is racist. You know that Hollywood is run by the Democrat Party. But the second a black person says, yeah, Hollywood is racist, like, oh, no, you're just butthurt about racism again. It's like, no, don't give them that. Right.
Okay. All right. I like this. Let me. I want to go back to the Hollywood thing in a second, but I love what you're saying here. I want to make sure I'm on the same page. So what it sounds like is conservatives need to clearly define, redefine, and take the mantle of being against systemic racism. And where the left may say, oh, systemic racism is what are some things that, like, Kamala Harris would say systemic racism is? Like, trying to think of something. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. If you're asking the question, for Kamala Harris, like, when we talk about disproportionate black incarceration, okay. Well, here's the thing about systemic racism and black incarceration. It's like conservatives should be like, yeah, you're exactly right. It's disproportionate. But who is the justice system run by? The justice system is run by a legion of Democrats. The activist judges who are Democrats. These areas where people are disproportionately incarcerated, they're all run by Democrats. So Republicans be like, yeah, of course there's systemic racism. Who do you think is at the helm of it? Like, say, for instance, when they're telling Donald Trump, do you denounce racism right now? Donald Trump should have been like, of course I denounce racism. That's why I don't vote Democrat.
Yeah, that's so good. Okay, so Kamala would say, here are 5 things that are systemic racism. Conservatives need to come back and say, no, here are the 5 things of systemic racism. You're the cause of them. We're the solution to them, and flip the whole script on them. I think that's brilliant. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, basically we talk about verbal judo here. It's instead of trying to butt heads with people who really don't speak the language of reason, why not just let Democrats fall on their own sword?
Yeah, that's stinking it. Man, yes. Gosh, that's good, Zoe. Okay, go back to the Hollywood's racist thing. What do you mean by that?
Well, Hollywood, Man, and I've been in that scene I remember going on casting calls, man, and you would listen to the criteria that there were. We need a black person, the typical black, and they would use words like typical. And the funny thing is that now in the hands of anybody else that would be racist, but they're able to say that we need you to play up the black character, the whole urban thing, and stereotype you, and you're expected to live by this stereotype. Now with Hollywood, they've promoted the ideas, these paradigms of how different people are supposed to be according to their persuasions, according to their genders and stuff like that. So in Hollywood itself, they promote these racial narratives that we're supposed to adhere to. And these things have to be called out. And when they are called out, once again, conservatives come in and rather than saying, yeah, you're exactly right, not agree that America's, and conservatives need to understand, it's not the agreement that America is inherently racist. It's simply the agreement that there is systemic racism, and here is your culprit, right here, the Democrat Party.
I love that nuance. That nuance is so good. All right, Zoe, we got to run, but listen, I'm stoked. First of all, I want to do more. I want to do more on this, and I'd love to have you back on, and we can chat more about it, because I think this is so super important. I want to make sure I'm on the same page with you, and I want to catch up to you a bit on this. And then team up and proceed on, because this is, that's brilliant. That's really, really good. How should people learn more about Zoe if they don't already know you?
Thank you, man. I'm at bronzeserpentmedia.com, and they can catch my efforts on there.
Yeah, let's do it again, bro. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Zoe Rachel, bronzeserpentmedia.com. All right, beautiful. That's our show. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about Trump's path to victory. You heard me. Tomorrow, true story. Mike Slater, spread the word.